Fear is the silent architect of your life. It hides behind your daily choices, your missed opportunities, your silence when you should have spoken. It's not loud, it's subtle. It doesn't say run, it whispers, not yet. And most people don't even realize they're obeying it. You think you're scared of failure, of rejection, of being seen? No. What you're really scared of is seeing yourself fully. Because deep down, you know you're not living at your full capacity. Carl Jung knew something most people still don't understand. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Carl Jung. Think about that. You're not just afraid of failing, or being judged, or taking risks. You're afraid of what happens if you stop pretending, if you stop hiding behind excuses, and finally face the full truth of who you are, your brilliance, your darkness, your potential. Let's make it real. Ever stayed in a relationship that felt wrong, but told yourself, it's safer than being alone? That's fear. Ever avoided sharing an idea in a group because you didn't want to look stupid, even though it burned in your chest? That's fear. Ever scrolled your phone for hours to avoid starting something important? That's fear too, but dressed up as procrastination. Carl Jung believed that fear isn't always just emotional, it's spiritual. Fear arises when we live disconnected from our deepest self. When we refuse to integrate the parts of us we've buried, our pain, our anger, our desire, our strength. Instead of facing them, we push them into the unconscious, and that's where the danger begins. Because, as Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. In other words, your unacknowledged fear becomes your master. It chooses who you date, what you pursue, how far you go, and how you feel about yourself, without you even realizing it. That's why fear feels like fate. That's why you keep sabotaging yourself, because the real battle isn't out there. It's in here, inside the parts of yourself you've never dared to face. And that's exactly what we're going to uncover today. Not fluffy advice, not surface-level motivation, but deep, raw psychological truth that Jung left behind, a roadmap to confronting and destroying fear from the inside out. So if you've ever felt stuck, paralyzed, or haunted by the question, why do I keep holding myself back? Stay with me, because what you're about to learn could finally set you free. First of all, fear isn't the enemy, it's the messenger. Let's get something clear from the start. Fear isn't trying to destroy you, it's trying to tell you something. But most people misread the message. You feel fear before stepping on stage, before telling someone how you really feel, before starting the business, or ending the relationship, or setting a boundary. What do we usually do? We freeze, we delay, we shrink. Why? Because we've been trained to treat fear like a wall. But Carl Jung saw it differently. Where your fear is, there is your task. Carl Jung. That's not just poetic, it's a psychological compass. Whatever you fear the most isn't a sign to run, it's a signal to move closer, to investigate, to listen, to uncover the part of yourself you've disconnected from. Because fear is born from disconnection. Disconnection from your instincts. Disconnection from your intuition. Disconnection from your shadow. Think of it like this. Imagine your soul is knocking on your door with a message. I want you to grow. But instead of answering the door, you turn up the TV, you scroll Instagram, you say, not now. That knock gets louder. That's fear. Not to punish you, but to wake you up. Here's a real-life example. You're offered a leadership role at work. You feel excited, but almost instantly fear creeps in. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail publicly? What if they see through me? So you decline. You stay in your comfort zone. But here's the twist. That role was never just about the job. It was your life asking, are you ready to step into more of who you really are? And fear was just the resistance trying to protect the outdated version of you. In Jungian terms, fear is often a signal that your ego is afraid of dying, afraid of change. The part of you that's familiar and safe wants to keep control. But your soul, it craves expansion. So next time fear shows up, ask yourself, is this fear trying to keep me safe, or is it trying to keep me small? That single question can change your entire life trajectory. Now that you know fear isn't your enemy, but a messenger, it's time to ask the deeper question. Where is this fear coming from? To answer that, we need to enter the hidden world of your shadow. Next up, we have the hidden source of fear, your rejected self. You've been taught that fear is something to get over, to push through, to suppress. But Jung saw it differently. He believed that fear is the smoke, not the fire. The fire is buried deeper in the part of you Jung called the shadow. The shadow isn't evil. It's not a demon lurking inside. It's simply made of everything you've disowned, denied, and repressed in order to be accepted. And guess what? Fear is the shadow's language. Let's make it practical. You grew up in a home where anger was bad. You probably repressed it. Now, as an adult, you can't set boundaries and you fear conflict. That's shadow. You were told you're too sensitive, too emotional, so you shut it down, and now you fear intimacy because you don't want anyone to see how much you really feel. That's shadow too. Jung explained this clearly when he said, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. To become conscious of it involves recognizing the dark aspects of the personality as present and real." This means facing your fear is not just about becoming braver, it's about becoming whole. Fear is not just about what you don't want to do, it's about who you're afraid to become. Let that sink in. If you've ever caught yourself thinking, "I'm not the kind of person who speaks up. I could never handle that much attention. That dream is too big for someone like me." That's not humility, that's your shadow speaking. It's fear shaped by all the versions of yourself you've buried just to be accepted by others. And here's the trap. The more you reject parts of yourself, the stronger your fear becomes. Because fear doesn't feed on weakness, it feeds on denial. So if you want to destroy fear at its root, you need to stop fighting it and start listening to it. You need to ask, what is this fear trying to protect me from? What part of me have I locked away that I now need to reclaim? This is the beginning of real power, the kind Jung described not as dominance but as integration. Bringing the shadow into the light, not to judge it, but to understand it. And in that moment, fear loses its grip. Thirdly, we look at how fear controls you without you knowing. Fear doesn't always show up as panic. It's rarely loud. It prefers masks. Fear is sneaky. It won't always yell at you. Sometimes it whispers, "You're not ready yet. What if they laugh at you? Just wait a little longer. This isn't the right time." These are not truths. These are defense mechanisms your mind uses to avoid stepping into discomfort. But remember, comfort never made anyone powerful. In fact, Jung warned us that fear often hides beneath the things we call normal. It wears the face of procrastination, perfectionism, people-pleasing, even logic. And if you're not paying attention, you'll mistake fear for just being careful. Let's break down a few common disguises. 1. Fear as overthinking. Ever stayed up all night playing mental chess about a simple decision? Fear isn't always screaming, "Don't do it!" Sometimes it whispers, "But what if it goes wrong? What if they judge you? What if you regret it?" That's not strategy, that's paralysis. Fear doesn't want clarity, it wants delay. Thinking is difficult, that's why most people judge. Carl Jung. We overthink to avoid taking action, but action is the only thing that kills fear. 2. Fear as perfectionism. Do you tell yourself, "I'll launch the project when it's perfect. I'll speak up when I know exactly what to say. I'll start when I feel fully ready"? That's fear dressed in ambition. Perfectionism is just fear of being seen as not enough. Jung would say, your ego is trying to protect your self-image from being bruised. But perfection is a myth, and every time you wait for it, you're teaching your brain that your fear is in control. 3. Fear as people-pleasing. This one hits deep. You say yes to things you don't want to do. You stay silent to avoid conflict. You smile when you want to scream. Why? Because fear tells you, if you're not liked, you won't be loved. If you're not nice, you'll be abandoned. This comes from a wounded place in the shadow, usually rooted in early life, where your value was tied to how well you performed for others. Jung warned that when we betray our inner truth to gain outer approval, we create a false self. And nothing suffocates the soul more than living inauthentically. Third, fear is logic and being realistic. This one's clever. Fear will convince you that you're being rational, that dreaming big is naive, that those kinds of things don't happen for people like you. But be honest, how often has being realistic really meant being scared? Jung once noted, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. If you never check in with your deeper truth, your desires, your values, your pain, you'll live in a world built by fear and call it safety. So what's the pattern? Fear adapts. It wears whatever mask you'll believe. It shapes itself to fit into your habits, your thinking, your identity. That's why so many people live unfulfilled lives. Not because they lacked talent or opportunity, but because they mistook fear for logic, comfort, and control. But once you learn to spot fear for what it is, a message from your shadow, not a death sentence, you stop reacting and start reclaiming. And that's where real transformation begins. Now, the path to fearlessness. Integrating the shadow. So you've spotted fear. You've seen its masks, perfectionism, people-pleasing, overthinking. But now comes the part most people skip. The inner confrontation. This is where the work gets uncomfortable. And that's why it works. Fear dies when you shine a light on it. Jung taught that the only way to break fear is to confront it consciously. Not fight it, not ignore it, but integrate it. You don't need to become fearless. You need to become self-aware. Carl Jung believed that true transformation only happens when we face and integrate the shadow, the parts of ourselves we've hidden, judged, or denied. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Carl Jung. What does that actually mean? It means if you want to destroy fear, you have to know it. Name it, sit with it, talk to it. Not as an enemy, but as a messenger. Because fear is always protecting something fragile, something you haven't fully owned yet. Here's how integration actually works in real life. 1. Name the fear. Start by writing down exactly what you're afraid of. Not in general terms like failure, but specifically. I'm afraid of looking stupid when I speak up. I'm afraid people will stop loving me if I show my true emotions. I'm afraid I'm not enough to chase that dream. When you name the fear clearly, you take it out of the shadows and into the light. You begin to disarm it. 2. Identify the origin. Ask yourself, where did I learn this fear? What moment? What person? What experience planted that seed? For example, if you're terrified of being wrong, maybe a parent or teacher mocked you for making mistakes. If you avoid conflict, maybe you grew up in a house where anger meant chaos or punishment. These moments live in your subconscious, and until you meet them again consciously, they'll keep running the show. 3. Reclaim what was rejected. This is the most powerful step. Ask, what part of myself did I abandon to survive? Maybe it was your voice. Maybe your assertiveness. Maybe your playfulness, your ambition, your creativity. Jung believed these rejected parts don't disappear. They go underground. And until you bring them back into your identity, you'll always feel divided and afraid. So how do you reclaim them? You practice showing up as your whole self, bit by bit. Speak when your voice shakes. Say no when it terrifies you. Take the risk even if fear screams at you not to. Every time you do, your brain rewires, your shadow softens, and your fear loses control over your life. This is not about becoming fearless overnight. It's about becoming fear literate. So when fear shows up, you don't obey it. You decode it. You say, I see you. I know why you're here, but I don't need you to protect me anymore. And just like that, you step into a new version of yourself, one that's not ruled by the past, but powered by truth. Now let's take a deeper look at Jung's concept of individuation and how embracing your full self, not just the polished version, leads to true freedom from fear. Carl Jung believed that the ultimate goal of human development is not perfection, but wholeness. He called this process individuation, becoming fully and consciously yourself, not who the world expects you to be. This isn't some feel-good motivational idea. This is deep psychological transformation. Because the more you deny parts of yourself, your flaws, your fire, your fears, the more you split. And when you're divided internally, fear has room to grow. But the moment you begin integrating the shadow, something powerful happens. You stop being at war with yourself. And when you're no longer fighting your inner world, the outer world loses its power to intimidate you. Let's get real for a moment. You've probably been taught to chase love, validation, or success by becoming better, more polished, more likable, more together. But what if the real path to peace is not by becoming better, but by becoming more you? Jung explained it perfectly. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Think about that. Not who your parents hoped you'd be. Not who society conditioned you to be. Not who fear manipulated you into becoming. But who you were before the world told you to be afraid of yourself. Let's paint a scenario. You're standing in a room full of people. Someone challenges your ideas. The old you shrinks. Your fear says, stay quiet, don't cause waves. But the integrated you says, this is my truth. I can express it calmly and stand by it. Or you feel drawn to start something bold. A business, a passion project, a relationship. Fear creeps in. You're not ready. You'll fail. Who do you think you are? But you've done the work. You recognize that voice, not as truth, but as a memory. And you say, even if I'm afraid, I'm moving forward anyway. This is individuation in real time. It's not about never being afraid again. It's about no longer letting fear decide your life. Because the opposite of fear isn't confidence. It's clarity. Clarity of self. Clarity of purpose. Clarity of who you are beneath all the noise. And the more you live from that place, the more fear becomes background static, no longer the voice that steers the ship. Transformation doesn't happen in a moment. It happens in small, intentional decisions made every day. Carl Jung's work wasn't just about insight. It was about integration. To destroy fear at the root, you need habits that rewire your nervous system and reshape your identity. Because fear isn't just a thought, it's a reflex. And like any reflex, it can be retrained. Let's break down a few daily practices that do exactly that. 1. Shadow dialogue. Start your morning with inner honesty. Each morning, sit down with a pen and paper. Ask yourself one simple question. What part of me am I trying to hide today? Maybe it's your anger. Maybe it's your ambition. Maybe it's your desire to rest or to be seen. Write it down. Speak to it like it's a part of you that deserves compassion, not shame. This is what Jung meant by making the darkness conscious. You can't heal what you won't even acknowledge. 2. Daily micro dares. Train your nervous system for boldness. Fear hates movement, so every day do something that stretches your identity, just slightly past your comfort zone. Speak your opinion in a group. Ask a question you're scared to ask. Say no when you normally say yes. Make that uncomfortable phone call. Each time you do this, you're teaching your brain. Fear is not a stop sign, it's a starting line. And with repetition, you change your baseline. Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. These daily dares interrupt fate. They reclaim your life from autopilot. 3. Self-reflection at night. Track your patterns. Before bed, reflect. When did fear show up today? Did I obey it or challenge it? What would my higher self have done differently? This isn't self-criticism, it's self-study. And over time, it builds massive emotional intelligence. You'll begin to notice patterns in how fear moves, what triggers it, when it shows up, what it whispers. And once you see a pattern, you can change it. 4. Reconnect with the body, because fear lives there. Jung believed the psyche and body are deeply connected. Fear isn't just in your thoughts, it's in your shoulders, your breath, your gut. So move, breathe, journal with your body, not just your mind. Take cold showers, meditate through discomfort. Dance, stretch, walk in silence, anything that grounds you in sensation. Because when you learn to sit with fear instead of running from it, your nervous system rewires. And what once felt like a threat now feels like fuel. These practices aren't about chasing perfection. They're about building inner muscle, a kind of psychological endurance that Jung would call individuation in motion. Fear might still visit you, but it won't control you. You'll feel the fear, and choose truth anyway. You'll hear the doubt, and act anyway. You'll sense the old reflex, but respond with the new self. Here's a truth that most people never hear. The very thing you're most afraid of is usually the gateway to the life you're meant to live. Carl Jung didn't see fear as something to eliminate. He saw it as a psychological signal, pointing you toward what your soul is ready to integrate. Fear, he believed, doesn't arise around things that don't matter. It shows up around things that touch your identity, your desire, your growth. That's why we often feel the most fear around speaking our truth, loving fully, creating something original, setting boundaries, stepping into leadership. We tell ourselves we're not ready, but what if the fear is there because we are? Let's flip the script. Instead of asking, how can I get rid of this fear? Ask, what is this fear protecting me from that I'm finally strong enough to face? This is where Jung's concept of the self comes in. Not the ego self, but the greater self, the totality of who you are meant to become. And here's the thing, the path to that self is always through the fire. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. Carl Jung. Your ego wants safety. Your soul wants expansion. And fear is the friction between the two. Let's get real. That dream you're too afraid to say out loud, that's where your calling is. That truth you've been avoiding because it might break things, that's where your healing is. That side of yourself you've been hiding to keep the peace, that's where your power is. You don't need more confidence. You need more alignment with what's real. Fear tries to keep you small, silent, and compliant. But once you realize that the fear is pointing to what matters most, everything changes. You stop running away and start leaning in. Let me paint you a quick scenario. You're offered a new opportunity, something big. Your heart races, your hands shake, your mind screams, you're not ready. But then you remember what Jung taught. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. You walk in anyway, afraid but awake, exposed but empowered. And what happens? You grow. You shed the old skin. You start becoming the version of yourself that fear tried to keep buried. By now you've seen that fear isn't your enemy, it's your teacher. And Carl Jung didn't want you to conquer fear in the way society tells you, by becoming tougher, louder, more dominant. He wanted you to understand it, to listen to it, to walk through it, because fear often guards the entrance to the most sacred parts of yourself, your truth, your power, your destiny. Let's go back to where we began. You don't destroy fear by pretending it doesn't exist. You destroy it by meeting it with awareness, by dragging it out of the shadows and holding it in the light of consciousness. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Carl Jung. This journey isn't about perfection, it's about integration. It's about becoming whole. When you stop hiding from fear, it loses its grip. When you embrace your shadow, it becomes your strength. When you listen to your deepest instincts, they lead you home, not to who the world wants you to be, but to who you truly are. So next time fear shows up, don't shrink, don't run, don't numb. Pause. Look it in the eye and ask, what truth are you trying to show me? Because when you face fear consciously, you don't just become braver, you become free. If this message hit you deep, don't just watch and scroll, act. Drop a comment below. I'm ready to face my fear. I read every single one, and your words might just inspire someone else today. Make sure to subscribe if you want more unfiltered wisdom from Jung and other great minds. And if you're serious about inner growth, tap that bell, because we're just getting started.